Sorceryincarnate.
Sorceryincarnate. This is, I think this is the one to keep your eye on. I think this is the big ticket item. Something also kind of interesting to keep in mind with all of these is that it seems like a lot of the design philosophies surrounding these classes is they're kind of leaning away from class functions, and they're kind of turning active class functions into spells, and then attaching a whole bunch of passives that augment those actives.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Kevin.
I'm Joey.
And we're talking again about the new Unearthed Arcana. New subclasses, new details, new rules.
Today we're talking about the Sorcerer, taking a look at that Metamagic.
So what do we got to start with?
So let's open up with general thoughts on how the Sorcerer played, what its problems were, what our opinions on this change are. Spoiler alert, they are looking mighty fine. These are honestly really great changes. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty of the changes and then wrap it up with the new Draconic Sorcery subclass. One of the big problems was the limited spell list. People just thought that only having 15 prepared spells wasn't enough. And the spells that you could choose, you just didn't get the same selection that that the wizard did.
Starting out with 2 spells prepared always seemed a little nutty to me, but that I don't think that changed, right? It's just the upper cap was changed. We'll get to that, but
yeah,
upper cap was changed, not the lower one. These days I do kind of find myself wanting to play a sorcerer, but I think the main thing is the wild magic option isn't dangerous enough for me.
Yeah, you want magic to be dangerous. And that kind of brings us to the next kind of problem was that the class fantasy of a sorcerer, of just this kind of like uncontrolled, kind of untrained, just raw talent that could just pop off and create wild, crazy stuff, like the innate magic, didn't really feel that it played to the class fantasy. Some of it was, it would have been interesting if, wild magic was kind of like a constant thing with sorcerers. And the wild magic subclass was just a way to reduce that randomness. A lot of the other issues kind of not coming into the class fantasy was really that kind of essence of barely suppressed magical power just didn't really come into many of the flavor or features or mechanical features that were presented in the vanilla book.
Yeah, I think to really encompass that, to just like raw definition would be that you start out with an incredible amount of power at a low level, but have very little control over the repercussions of it, and then leveling up would provide that control.
Yeah, and that was kind of the intention behind wild magic, but it would have been nice to see that kind of translated more towards the rest of the class. But that's not really having randomness in your class is not really 5th edition's MO.
Yeah, or that level of danger.
Yeah. So another kind of criticism of the vanilla class was the low number of metamagic abilities. Really felt limiting. I think in the old one you got 4 at maximum. You got your choice of 2, and then once every several levels you got a choice of 1 more.
But there was never an option to swap them out, right?
I don't believe so. I could be wrong. I don't really remember. I don't remember ever swapping them out. And I kind of remember that being because there were a couple that were just objectively better than others.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of needed to really take. I felt pressure to take the ones that were objectively better than others.
They in these changes they recognize at least one that was just definitively better than the rest.
Mm-hmm. Before we jump into changes, just going through our the general thoughts. This class it feels much better both mechanically and flavor wise. The expanded spell lists and expanded metamagic are great welcome changes, and the new feature, the Sorceryincarnate, kind of sounds like that is going to be the cornerstone of that. Like that is effectively the sorcerer's ultimate. Mm-hmm. And that's probably what the other subclasses going forward are going to revolve around, and we'll get into what all that is.
Yeah, that new draconic feature procs off of that specific new sorcerer spell, and it sounds like it's going to be the case for everyone going forward.
Yeah, probably.
I think the changes that we're gonna get into, and we're kind of just talking about the design principles of 5th edition and Wizards of the Coast. We're gonna see in Sorcerer and as well as Wizard and Warlock, the heroic fantasy that Dungeons and Dragons is really get reinforced. Mm-hmm. So, what's our first change here?
So first up is innate sorcery. This gives the sorcerer Sorcerer's Burst and Chaos Bolt as prepared spells that they don't count against the prepared spell list. So these are 2 new spells. They kind of are big blaster spells that change their attribute based on what the sorcerer wants, and then they kind of have a secondary ability.
Yeah, I think the spells specifically, I could really give or take on them. The spells being Sorcerer's Burst and Chaos Bolt. But when you really consider the limited spells that a sorcerer has, they should take what they can get.
Yeah, and when you do kind of think about being able to change the elemental attribute, Sorcerer's Burst being able to do like 5 or 6 different damage types is technically 5 or 6 different cantrips.
Right, and hopefully this will just incentivize sorcerers to take a little utility with their limited options at the start.
Yeah, you can really just kind of rely on one being your main blaster, and then just
take some buffs.
Yeah, do something else, do some interesting stuff. Next up is spell casting. You can now change out cantrips at each level. So this is, some more love. This seems to be a change across the board. Everybody seems to now be able to change out their cantrips.
Right. It's a game. We like options. We like changing out our options.
Yeah, I like to play test something a little bit, decide whether or not you like it, and then,
Especially considering there's still a hefty amount of time between levels.
Oh, yeah.
To be stuck with a cantrip still.
Yeah.
Or whatever your spell lineup is.
Yeah.
They also added more, like we said, more spells known over the life of the sorcerer. So while you still start at 2, you're ending at 22. So sounds like you're at least going to keep gaining them per level. I haven't gone back to look at the old chart, but I guess that means that there were some levels where you didn't gain spells. It
originally capped out at 15, so yes.
Oof, that's a feels bad, man.
That is pretty rough.
It's done at last time you get it is what 17th level. You get the 15th spell previously, and then you just don't get anything from 17th, 18th. Or 18th, 19th, 20?
Yeah, really rough.
That is rough. I didn't even think about that when we were going over this.
Yeah. No change for Font of Magic, just kind of clarifying language there. And then Metamagic. So you, instead of starting off with 2, you get 3 Metamagic options. You can change them out on a long rest, and you get 3 more at level 13. So I think this is a great welcome change from what it previously was.
Do you have more Metamagic, or it's still 4,
yes.
right?
No, you have 6 now.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so instead of 4, now it's 6.
At 20th level.
At 13th.
Oh, okay. Three meta magic options instead of 2.
Yeah.
3 more at 13th level. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's very nice. Next up was Sorcerer's Vitality. This was a interesting option. It's we felt as a spell, it's kind of mid when compared to the other kind of spells that operate at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not really anything else that's kind of like it, and this is kind of in line with other changes that we've seen across classes where they're trying to give other kind of classes more self-reliance in their ability to kind of like shrug off effects and pick themselves up. So this is, you gain,
I think it's 2d6 plus sorcerer level, and then it heals certain status.
It removes blind, deafen, and poisoned. So yeah, it's just another one of those like, here's essentially second wind to remove conditions. Here's second wind and indomitable.
Yeah, I guess if, their intention was to allow you to not take that because you already have something if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
Just given the sorcerer options, like this is so limited they can use it.
Yeah, I think the reason that we were kind of like meh on it was that it was third. It comes in at 3rd level, and when it kind of is competing with the other things that you can do at 3rd level. But if it's also the kind of thing that will save your life, who isn't going to be using that spell slot?
I've never suffered through the low spells known as a sorcerer, because a barbarian never runs out of smash.
That's true. Oh, he can run out of arms, I suppose, if they,
You can try.
Ooh, I keep punching this thing. Yeah, this DM screen cannot contain me. Next up was Arcane Eruption. So we kind of felt that Arcane Eruption was trying to embody the chaotic and explosive nature of magic. So Arcane Eruption is a 4th level evocation spell. It kind of fulfills a similar niche to Fireball, but everything affected by it on the failed save, something happens. So it's another kind of spell that you get in the Sorcerer package, and it's kind of AoE damage. It's kind of crowd control. The effect ultimately is random, and there's nothing else like it, but it is kind of like. And you can change the damage type, so it has a little bit more like versatility than something like Fireball to kind of make up, and that secondary effect to make up for the lower damage. But it is a 4th level spell.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they really just want to provide the sorcerer with an option in every field. It feels like, so that you could say, all right, I have Sorcerous Eruption, so I'm going to take more support spells, or I have Sorcerous Vitality, so I'm going to take more DPS spells. Really just letting you feel more comfortable focusing on the aspect of sorcery you want to.
Yeah, the really interesting component of sorcery is the Metamagic options, and I think like what they were trying to do was give the sorcerer stuff that was unique, that was off of the main arcana spell list, that they could kind of have and play with and have it be their own, and then like dabble with,
yeah,
while not like forcing people to take, because they added something like, what was it, 4 or 5 new spells, and so 21 of, if they didn't just give them to you, 4 or 5 of those 22 new spell slot known spells will kind of just go to that, and it would just be like, you're kind of killing the mojo, bro.
Yeah, they might even just not get picked even.
Yeah. Yeah. But so it's nice to have those kind of wrapped up. Next up is
Sorceryincarnate.
Sorceryincarnate. This is I think this is the one to keep your eye on. I think this is the big ticket item. It's kind of like a rage ability for sorcerers. Not it's different than something like the spell singer or the blade singer wizard subclass, because it's something that enhances your sorceress prowess.
Yeah, this is the one we mentioned where the final feature of the Draconic subclass and maybe the other subclasses when they're out with this are going to proc off this ability. So when you activate this, your Dragon Wing ability will also activate.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's a 5th level transmutation spell. You can use up to 2 of your metamagic options on each spell you cast, provided you pay the sorcery point costs. You have advantage on the attack rolls of every spell you cast.
Mm-hmm.
Metamagic is definitely the spicy part of that, but the advantage is going to be the real hero.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, that's really huge. That is a really huge thing. Does it also give disadvantage to people doing checks, or is it just advantage?
Just advantage.
Okay.
You also do regain 1d4 sorcery points when you cast it.
Right. Yeah, I know that there was another point. So I thought this was like a really cool kind of innate like rage spell that they kind of throw on. Something also kind of interesting to keep in mind with all of these is that it seems like a lot of the design philosophies surrounding these classes is they're kind of leaning away from class functions, and they're kind of turning active class functions into spells and then attaching a whole bunch of passives that augment those actives. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be a theme across the whole board there.
I think the idea with that is to just consolidate where you have to look to find things. Mm-hmm. They want to have as much stuff on the class itself and in your spell list as possible.
Mm-hmm. So Sorceress Restoration.
Previously, it was just at 20th level, you regain 4 expended sorcery points whenever you finish a short rest.
And now it's just at level 15.
Oh, so same deal?
Yes, exact same thing, just lower level, which is good. Arcane Apotheosis. So this was kind of a crazy one. With Arcane Apotheosis, you kind of just get Wish as a class feature. So you can cast Wish to duplicate the effects of any other spell, and you can, if you are to use Wish to kind of cast some of those more lofty kind of abilities that Wish implies, you don't suffer the potential downsides from never casting Wish again.
In addition, you can cast Wish to replicate a spell of 1st through 8th level without expending a 9th level spell slot. Oh, never mind. You instead expend a spell slot of the replicated spell's level. Once you use Wish in this way, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest.
Yeah.
But then you also just don't undergo the spells. Damn. Right. That's right.
You don't undergo the spell's negative effects anymore. Yeah, so you just kind of always have Wish prepared. So, which is kind of interesting because now you can take a second 9th level spell for free.
I think it's a spicy one.
I think it's good.
Definitely very versatile.
I think it kind of really speaks to that kind of unformed magic, just pushing magic to manifest as the will of the character, of the player. So I think that is a great kind of really in line with like the class fantasy. I know you and I were talking, we kind of were talking about, you were a little bit disappointed how it took away the risk of Wish, because Wish was really the only spell that kind of had a built-in negative. But then we kind of just like, we're just like, I didn't like that because that would be taking away a class feature of
Well, I was just saying if I was designing an RPG,
No,
I
I
would do
know.
it that way.
I just mean to speak on like what that discussion kind of informed us about the Wizards design philosophy, as like taking away the one thing, the one risky element of one of the only spells that has that risky element, really speaks to the philosophy of not putting people in danger because of their class abilities.
I just think risk is fun and dramatic.
No, totally. It's just is really indicative of the kind of heroic fantasy theming that they're trying to
Absolutely
impart.
All of these changes are making these, well, I guess not barbarian or fighter, which is surprising, but the casters are becoming more heroically fantastical.
Yeah.
And then the last was the epic boon that every class is going to have. Your charisma score increases by 2 to a maximum of 30, and you can take an epic boon feat.
Yeah, there's a nice one that kind of combos with sorcerer that you basically misty step just cause after you cast a spell. So that's one to look into, one to keep your eye on. And then we get into Metamagic. One thing that's nice in the way that they organize Metamagic in the Unearthed Arcana doc was the cost was clearly listed under the Metamagic name, so you don't need to fish through the text block to kind of see it. So that's one nice change. Careful Spell neutralizes damage when it didn't previously.
So before, you could designate your friends and say, all right, if these guys fail their save, they take half damage or something like that. Now it's just these friends of yours do not take damage. The next one is Distance Spell. This one took our brains a couple seconds to do the math out.
Yeah.
But when you cast a spell that has a range of at least 5 feet, you can spend 1 sorcery point to increase the spell's range by a number of feet equal to 30 times your sorcerer level.
The first time you read that, I thought you said 30 plus your sorcerer level, and I was super confused as to how that was a buff.
When I was reading this out, I thought that must be what they meant. Because that's second level, that's already 60 feet. 10th level, 300 feet. That's 10th level, that's more than you could ever possibly need.
What that means is if you were to cast Burning Hands and you were to use Distance Spell, you could just make a cone more than 300 feet long, like 315 feet long.
It's horrifying.
Next up is Extended Spell. The timing is still the same. It's just you have advantage on maintaining concentration, which is pretty nice because this kind of frees up, the main benefit of taking something like War Magic. That was like the primary benefit of taking like War Magic. So, you can just spend a sorcery point and not have to worry about that.
Yeah, like tough on a barbarian. Why is your caster not taking War Mage?
Yeah. Heightened Spell. Heightened Spell is 1 point cheaper, still operates the same. Subtle Spell. I think the only change that they made to Subtle Spell was that it no longer requires non-consumable components. So if the spell has like components, like material components, it no longer requires those, which is like who was playing with material components to begin with.
Yeah. I think this is a very fun one. I think this is probably not one of the optimal ones, but it's very fun when you like get handcuffed and you're like,
I think it's a great spell. I think it does have a lot of versatility because this is the kind of thing where like if you want to cast Minor Illusion or Prestidigitation or something without anybody knowing that it's you, especially if the thing had a verbal component. So I think it's incredibly useful.
Override a silence spell.
What?
Override a silence spell. You can take out the verbal component of a spell and still cast it
I guess
in the silence bubble.
Yeah, actually. That is pretty. Yeah, so I think it has a lot of value. Subtle Spell has a lot of value.
It's a spell that has a lot of value once you reach the moment where it's useful. I don't think it's
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's not always good.
Yeah.
It's conditional, but when it's there, it's a silver bullet.
it's the kind of one that probably doesn't stand up when you're like comparing all these meta options like case by case.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the kind that you are so glad you took when you really need it.
Mm-hmm. Nothing better than a subtle spell to like throw your voice when the goblins are arguing about how to cook you. Twin spell.
Yeah.
So Twin spell was the only one that got a nerf, an intentional nerf. So previously, they say they give an explanation for Twin spell in the doc, and they kind of say that it was a bit too powerful, and it didn't really fit with what they were trying to do. It kind of allowed you to cast 2 spells at once. And I was thinking about that, and I kind of realized, like, 2 spells on one turn, I think that's what they were saying. Mm-hmm. And I kind of realized that, like, I never played that way. So by me playing wrong, I was playing right. I was playing right to the spirit of the game.
Because Dungeon Master wants to be nice to the Dungeon Master.
I was under the impression Twin spell only worked with cantrips because you can only cast 1 spell per turn. So that I was under the impression that that's what was the case. So
honestly, I probably would have read it that way as well.
Yeah.
The new twin spell says when you cast a spell of 1st to 5th level that you also cast on your previous turn by expending a spell slot, you can fuel this turn's casting of the spell by spending a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level rather than expending a spell slot.
So this is a pretty interesting ability because it's so now instead of it being a spell for burst damage, it's more about sustainability. So let me give you this kind of, for instance, let's say a sorcerer takes Fireball, right? At 6th level, you have 3 level 3 spell slots. Let's say you cast Fireball 3 turns in a row. You can then cast Fireball again twice more on your next 2 turns using the twin spell feature. So instead of having access to just 3 level spell slots, now because of twin spell, you effectively have 5 level 3 spell slots in that, for instance.
Right.
So it's really an interesting way to kind of just cheat out spells below 5th level.
An interesting kind of synergizes with that, but is also a very careful and pointed limitation on this. No reaction spells, so you can't do this with like counter spell, something like that. So, but if you look at it this way, casting Fireball that way and keeping up the 3rd level power momentum keeps those extra 2 slots open so that you have counter spell in the holster and still milk out 3 fireballs.
Yeah, it's a very interesting kind of change. It kind of makes you have to think a little bit more pointedly on how you're going to use your resources, when to use them, and like what you should use them for. And so I think it's a good change. It also took away the targeting component. Like, so before you could only do it for spells that specifically targeted a single creature, but now you can do it for really anything. Like they removed that specification. And this is pretty good because this is now kind of like helping sorcerers have more spell slots. Before they could exchange sorcery points for spells and spells for spell slots for sorcery points, but this is a very like direct way to do it cheap and just cheat out spells. It doesn't, just by the wording of it, it seems to be a straight up combat ability.
I'm sure you could figure out a use for it.
You could, but I just say because the ability text explicitly refers to rounds.
Next we have the Draconic Sorcery subclass. So all classes are going to be renamed thusly. Before it was the Draconic Bloodline, now it will just be Draconic Sorcery.
Yeah, that change seems to be a flavor change. It seems to be that they want to step away from this is how you got this, and leaving that much more up into the player's interpretation. And that was kind of made clear in the beginning of the text, where it's like there was an event that altered you in some way, giving you this innate magical ability.
Yeah, it just puts the power in the player's hands to decide how they got it, which I think people were doing anyway, and that's probably where the change came from.
Yeah. But, it's always good when the changes kind of mirror the disposition of the players. So.
Exactly. The first feature is Draconic Resilience, which is going to be a new scaling armor class. Well, it's not new, but previously it was 13 plus your dex mod. Now it's 10 plus dex and charisma.
Yep.
So it's probably going to start out maybe around the same place, if not lower maybe, but it's going to scale higher as you level up. Dragon Speech.
So this was formerly Draconic Ancestry, and they kind of fragmented Draconic Ancestry and changed some stuff. So Draconic Speech, you can now talk to any dragon type creature, and the damage type that was previously associated with Dragon Ancestry has been moved to Elemental Affinity. So it's now a purely RP ability, and they took away the charisma bonus that you got previously.
Which brings us to Elemental Affinity in question.
So Elemental Affinity no longer costs sorcery points for the resistance. You just get the resistance, which is nice.
I didn't realize it costed that.
Yeah, before I think it was like 1 sorcery point and you had to like actively cast it. So instead this is just a passive resistance that just is there. Now boost the damage of spells that are associated with that type. So they give you like 5 different types of damage. And so this is also kind of a nice, because it plays on those spells that you previously got in the class. So your Sorcerous Burst, your kind of other blaster spells that are innate that you can change the damage type to. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of play more into that fantasy of like, I am an ice dragon sorcerer, I'm a fire dragon sorcerer type stuff. So that's a very nice kind of mechanical change that also reflects the flavor.
Yeah, I think one of their design principles was to just make this damage type more useful.
Yeah. Something also, a footnote that I made was I thought the wording was odd on this one a bit. They say you can add your charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. And I was kind of thinking about what that meant. And then I kind of realized what that means is if you have a spell that targets multiple creatures, like Scorching Ray, where you're rolling multiple damage profiles for each of those creatures, you can only add your charisma as damage to one of those rolls. So only one of those things. I believe that's what that means.
Makes sense. Be pretty spicy otherwise.
Yeah, that would be a pretty crazy buff otherwise.
And speaking of getting more use out of that damage type, Draconic Exhalation. Once per turn, when you cast Sorcerous Burst, you can exhale it in a 15-foot cone rather than selecting a target within range. To cast the spell this way, you must choose the damage type associated with your Elemental Affinity feature. When you do so, you make separate attacks and damage rolls against each creature in the spell's cone.
Yeah. So, kind of similar to what we were just mentioning about how they want specific damage for specific things.
Features proccing off spells.
Yep.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, spells are the core function of any spellcaster, so they probably should have like invested features more heavily in them.
And then lastly,
the Draconic Wings.
The Dragon Wings. So it's kind of a little bit sad to see these go, but not entirely. They're now kind of the Dragon Wings are now tied to your Sorceryincarnate ability. So whenever you pop your Sorceryincarnate ability, these kind of elemental spectral wings sprout from your back, and you have them for as long as your Sorceryincarnate ability lasts. Before it was pretty much an at-will fly ability, and
That's what I was looking for.
And from the wording that it was previously, the wings were like these fleshy bat wings that kind of grew from your back. Mm-hmm. Now they're just kind of like this manifestation of energy. So I think, like, you know, take it how you feel. If you like the kind of like vivimancy, kind of like morbid type of like these like fleshy things sprouting from your back, I think that's cool. If you like the image of just like brimming with power and this like maybe it's not even necessarily wings as much as it is just magic exploding from your back when you like cast this ability.
You said previously it broke anything that was on your back, right?
Yeah, it couldn't break through armor, but any sort of like common clothing, it would just tear it to shreds.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, it doesn't do that, but it doesn't do that anymore. And
right.
So you can, by the wording of it, you can technically wear heavy armor with your with these wings on.
You got to take a lot of feats to get there, though. It also has a pulsing damage effect.
Yes.
When does that proc off?
At the end of each turn.
Oh, so you get your movement each turn to catch up to somebody.
I think it was at the end. I think it was at the end of each of your turns.
Yeah, so you get your movement. Let's see. In addition, at the end of each of your turns, you can flap the wings to unleash magical energy. Yeah, so you get to have your movement to make sure that lines up with your with your surroundings, what you want to take damage.
Yeah, it's in a 15-foot area around you, everything takes damage equal to your charisma modifier, equal to the damage type of your affinity. So it's an interesting kind of damage ability. I don't think that there was a save for it. I think it just happens. So like everything around you is just taking 5 damage.
Yeah, but it's not like they're getting knocked prone or anything like that. So, and it's the amount of damage is just your charisma modifier, which is good, but it's not like you're not breaking the bank on that one.
Yeah, it just kind of is like you're kind of just a mortis engine in a way, but you know, it's a good way to deal with the rats, I'll say.
That's true. But yeah, that's all the changes to Sorcerer in this Unearthed Arcana, and I think we can all agree that that's a pretty hefty buffs there.
Yeah, some not just mechanical buffs, but like narrative buffs.
Very flavorful buffs, yeah.
It was more on the side of flavor, I feel, than mechanical. Mm-hmm. And I think the changes were great. I think like I think it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of dig into the Sorcerer. As I was reading through this, you know, I am a martial main. And as I kind of dig into this stuff, I'm excited to play a sorcerer.
Hell yeah.
So.
Me too, actually.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to us go over these changes. Please like, comment, and subscribe. You have anything else to add?
And comment down below if you end up trying this out. Tell us what you think. Does it feel more powerful?
Well, thank you. Have a good night.
Night, y'all.